folks, I'm Heather, and this is recently seen reading, even though you haven't recently seen me reading. It's been that kind of a year, but I thought I would wind up 2022 by doing the book Postscript Tag, which goes around at this time of year, late December, early January, which was originally created by Adam at Memento Mori. There are about 10 questions, so I think I should be able to step through this one pretty briskly as a way of getting back into the habit. So question number 1, what's the longest book I read this year and how long did it take me? So it's the same book for both. The longest book I read this year was The Tale of Genji, the Royal Tyler translation. It was about 1,200 pages, and that probably took me about 6 months. I found that a slow read for me. And this also is my answer for the second question, a book that was outside my comfort zone. So Tale of Genji is outside of my comfort zone. I read very little medieval, to use a European term, Japanese literature, so the entire conventions of the novel were foreign to me, and some of them were difficult to grapple with, so that was well outside my comfort zone. I am glad that I read it. I don't know that it's on a reread list for me. So that brings us to question 3, how many books did I reread in 2022? I reread about a dozen, which is considerably more than I usually manage to reread in a year, even though I think of myself as a rereader. The stats don't lie. And of those, my favorite reread was Middlemarch, which I read when I was 19 or 20, and it reads very differently when you're in your early 60s. All the stories about love and thwarted marriages and difficult lives, happy lives, disappointed lives, it hits differently when you're in your 60s, and it makes more sense, or it did at least to me. And Middlemarch is actually probably my favorite read of the year, maybe second favorite. Question number 5, what's a book I read for the first time this year that I think I might reread in the future? I've got 2 answers for this. One is Dorothy Richardson's Pointed Roofs. This is the first volume in her novel sequence Pilgrimage, and it's usually identified as the earliest or one of the very earliest stream of consciousness novels, and she hated that term. But there's something quite different, in my reading experience at least, of how she captures the interiority of the female character whose name has escaped me. So I'd like to kind of tackle that one again in the future, maybe after I've read a couple more volumes in the sequence. And the second one I wanted to reread, probably soonish, would be Dorothy Baker's Young Man with a Horn. Baker is a mid-20th century US writer, and I've read a couple of her books over the last, probably 2 years, and there's something about them that I find very interesting. And in Young Man with a Horn, it's a story of Rick Martin, a musician, as he goes from a child to a young adult, early adult years, and becomes a very skilled musician and builds complex, profound relationships across the color bar. And there's something about Baker's combination of interior landscapes and a plot that drives forward that I found quite interesting. So that's on my reread soonish list. Question 6, what's a favorite short story or novella I read this year? I'm not a big short story reader. I read maybe 1 volume, 2 volumes a year, and occasionally enough pick up a novella. In terms of short story collections, I recently finished Tuva Janssen's Letters from Clara. I think the title short story from that collection, Letters from Clara, is quite fun. It's an epistolary short story told from the perspective of Clara, who is, like a lot of Janssen's characters at this point in her writing career, a cranky old woman, and it's kind of fun to read from the perspective of a cranky old woman. In terms of novella, if we counted Sam Selvon's The Housing Lark as a novella, I would say that is my favorite novella of the year. It's not as strong as The Lonely Londoners, but it has the similar kind of cast of characters, similar narrative approach, and the same kind of energy and happiness at the bottom in that novella. It's one I would recommend, especially if you've read Lonely Londoners. Question 7, Mass Appeal. A book I liked and would recommend to a variety of readers that would be what is probably my favorite book of the year. That would be Kate Beaton's Ducks. This is a graphic memoir about the 2-3 years she spent working in the tar sands, working in essentially man camps in the northern part of Alberta as clerical labor, essentially. And it covers many of the difficult and unhappy things that happened to her there and to lots of other people there. And it offers these stories of harassment in all of its forms and unhappiness in all of its forms, with incredible amount of generosity to people who were unkind to her and harmed her. It's at its very heart, I think, a generous, thoughtful interpretation, not only of her own difficult experiences, but of the difficult experiences of the men around her. It's popping up on all kinds of best of 22 lists, and it's one I highly recommend. It's an excellent graphic memoir. And 8th question, a book of specialized appeal that I wouldn't recommend to just anyone. I have a bit of a thing for Antarctic exploration literature, so the book that I would pop into this category is Anne Fletcher's Widows of the Ice. And this is a collective biography. It tells the story of Kathleen Bruce, Robert Scott's widow, Ori Wilson, Edward Wilson's widow, and Lois Evans, Teddy Evans' widow. It's got all the strengths and weaknesses of collective biographies, but it tackles something that's typically ignored in accounts of Antarctic exploration. What were the lives of the people left behind like? It's a well done collective biography, and I would recommend it to anyone who is interested in polar literature or the lives of Edwardian women. So question 9 asks me to reflect on my year as a bookish creator. Well, I've been a bookish person. I've been reading lots. I read as many books as one person could hope to read in a year. Many of them good, some of them bad, and lots of them just ordinary. So it was a good reading year, I suppose. Not an excellent reading year, but a good reading year. But it wasn't a good content creation year. I'm still trying to get into a routine. I retired this year and had some kind of stuff I had to deal with in the summer that I didn't expect to have to deal with, all resolved happily. But I found it hard to get into a regular routine. I'm popping up, I think, in people's comments more often than I am as a recorded comment on video. And maybe with a bit of luck I'll be able to resolve that in 2023. I hope you had a good 2022 and that you have a fabulous 2023 and that you got through the tail end of the year, which is often a very difficult time for people, with grace and good humor. And if not, that you got through it all the same. Bye-bye.